So from now on, I'm just going to write these scripts a stream of thought gobbledygook while injecting research citations and random references as I see fit. Because I'm just so fatigued by reading so much AI writing, and I want to try and sound as different from that as possible for the sake of my own nerves and sense of boredom. So, yeah, that being out of the way, let's talk about Sony, physical media, and why the Ecopsych take on all this might be a lot different than you might think at first, thought. First things first, Sony just announced to overwhelming applause and rejoicing in the streets that they will stop physical disc production for new games in January 2028. Any new games after that point will be sold through the PlayStation Store and other solely digital formats instead of discs. This is obviously huge because PlayStation is one of the largest console platforms in the world. Duh. So, if they are announcing a move away from physical game discs, it signals a larger change in the whole gaming ecosystem. At first, this shift can look environmentally responsible. And of course, this would be an angle that they and any other large companies that jump on this bandwagon would be eager to spin. Digital games don't require plastic cases, printed covers, the actual discs, warehouses and trucks to store and move those discs, etc. They're easy to access and download, easy to update, and easier for a lot of indie devs to release. All real benefits, all sounds good. It's important to bring up, though, that digital games aren't ecologically weightless either. They still depend on physical systems and still require servers, broadband networks, all the electricity and tech you'd need to play physical discs anyways. You get the idea. So a huge digital game, like a Sony release, that is repeatedly downloaded, patched, deleted, re-downloaded, and streamed through cloud servers is not as environmentally harmless as it initially appears. So both digital and physical games have an environmental footprint. Like everything, great. Let's look at some of the eco-psychological things happening here, though. In nature, diverse ecosystems are more resilient. A forest with many species is stronger than a field with only one crop. The same idea applies to culture and media. A healthy gaming ecosystem, so to speak, needs more than one way for games to be accessed, shared, and preserved, or else we risk losing so much. Physical games support many different pathways. They can be bought new, of course, bought used, borrowed from a pal, even checked out from a library, RIP Blockbuster. They're collected, displayed, gifted, donated, and preserved in archives and museums. A physical game disc can have a long life of moving from one player to another without needing the original company to stay involved forever. Digital-only games often require a platform account, an internet connection, a digital storefront, a license, and the continued support of a company. Big red flag for me right there. This pathway can be convenient, sure, but it also makes it way more fragile. Everything is built like Jenga. If a digital storefront closes, if a game is delisted, if a license expires, if an account becomes inaccessible, then bam, you lose access. And to be clear, this is already a huge problem for preservation. The Video Game History Foundation found that 87% of classic games are not currently in release and described them as critically endangered. They also explain that libraries and archives face serious legal limits when trying to share preserved games digitally. And sure, physical discs don't magically solve all preservation problems, and they come with a slew of their own issues, but they at least provide us with a better chance of keeping this history alive. Another principle of Ecopsych is change. Change happens. It's the only constant. Technology changes and player habits change. It would be unrealistic to close our eyes and pretend that the gaming industry can or should stay the same as it was in the 90s or early 2000s. Digital distribution has changed gaming in many positive ways. I'm not arguing that. The problem isn't change itself, it's when change is presented as progress, while in reality it's actually reducing player rights, cultural memory, and long-term access. And it's being shoved down our throats. There are elements of a diskless future that can sound convenient, but also shift power away from players and towards companies. And to be clear, once this happens, it won't shift back. We will no longer own a tangible, stable object. Instead, we will pay for access that is controlled by a platform. PlayStation's terms of service state that when a person purchases a product from their store, what they're really buying is a personal license for private, non-commercial use. The terms also state that this license is non-transferable unless local law requires it and that the user does not own the product. In plain English, this means that a digital purchase does not mean ownership in the same way a physical copy does. If players believe they are buying a game, but the company defines the purchase as a temporary or limited license, then the relationship between games and these companies is unclear. Ecopsych would see this as a damaged relationship. A healthy relationship requires clarity, reciprocity, and trust. Digital distribution can 100% be a part of a better future, but only if companies are honest about what players are actually receiving. And if there are options. Forcing people to buy digital by removing any other physical option is definitely not promoting a sense of healthy relationship with the gaming community. Just doubling down on this principle of relationship in Ecopsych. Players don't only relate to games as entertainment products. For many, certain video games hold memories, grief, friendships, a sense of childhood, comfort, and belonging. We have relationships to the game worlds and often the physical games themselves. Cover art, manuals, relics of gaming past can mean so much to us. I've personally held on to games with scratch discs that are now completely unplayable, just because they meant something to me at some point in my life. You can have an incredibly moving experience with a digital game too, don't get me wrong, but you can't pack it up and carry it over to a friend's house. The whole relationship can feel a lot less like mine and more like something I'm allowed to access for now. Like I said before, the relationship is mediated by a company, an account, storefront, password, license agreement, server. Any part of that chain breaks, and you're screwed. Let's look at decay and renewal. Forests burn and regenerate. Technologies become obsolete. The ethical question is whether systems allow meaningful renewal or if all they produce is dead ends. Like I talked about with scratch discs, physical games decay materially. E-waste is a major global problem. The Global E-Waste Monitor reported a record 62 billion kilos of e-waste in 2022. Who knows what we're up to now? But physical games can also renew through circulation. On a basic level, used copies can pass on. On the more complicated end, physical tech can be repaired and preserved. The digital-only fantasy often denies decay by promising endless availability. The cloud sounds like heaven, everywhere, weightless, permanent. But the cloud is actually land, water, minerals, labor, heat, electricity, cooling systems, fiber optic cables, and corporate contracts. When a digital game disappears, often suddenly or without much warning, it doesn't decompose into salvageable, shareable parts. It usually disappears into legal infrastructures. We can't blindly romanticize physical media. Physical games have problems. They aren't pure, but digital-only futurism carries a dangerous mythology that tries to present disappearance to us as progress and dependency as convenience and just the way things are moving. Better hop on board. The eco-psychological answer wouldn't be to choose one format over the other forever. The better future for video game media would not be completely physical or completely digital. It would be plural. It would support more than one way for game worlds to live. A healthier game culture and relationship between companies and players would not treat players as temporary license holders inside closed corporate systems. It would treat games as cultural worlds worth caring for and plan for their sustaining. In the end, the question isn't just how games are sold to us, which is of course not a small or petty question anyways, but the larger question is what kind of world the gaming industry wants to help create. Thank you as always for being a part of this little ecosystem and listening to me ramble.